Hello, thank you for attending today's webinar, How Formulation Drives Sustainability in Pet Food Production. This webinar is sponsored by Format Solutions and presented by Pet Food Industry. I'm Debbie Phillips Donaldson, Editor-in-Chief of Pet Food Industry, and I will be your moderator today. Before we start, I have a few housekeeping announcements. There will be a question and answer segment at the end of our presentation today. Please submit your questions in the Q&A window in the GoToWebinar panel on the right side of your screen. We will answer as many questions as we can within the time allowed. I'd also like to note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available to view as an on-demand video starting tomorrow. We have another webinar scheduled in a couple of weeks, Global Pet Food Trends 2025, What's Driving Market Growth. To register for that, view the on-demand video of today's webinar or see other on-demand videos of webinars on related topics, please visit petfoodindustry.com/webinars. Courtesy of our speaker, we have a handout of today's presentation available to download. Excuse me. You can download the PDF in the handouts window of the GoToWebinar panel, again on the right side of your screen. The PDF will be available only to download during this live broadcast, so please sure to do that before we end. Later in today's presentation, we will present several poll questions that we hope you will please answer. And the speaker is looking forward to seeing your responses, and you will see those too during the broadcast. And finally, at the conclusion of today's webinar, there will be a brief survey. We would greatly appreciate if you took a few minutes to fill that out. Our sponsor today is Format Solutions. Format Solutions is the leading global provider and innovator of integrated formulation and feed ERP software that helps animal feed and pet food manufacturers maximize productivity, use data as a competitive advantage, and drive smarter business growth. Through advanced formulation and feed ERP software, Format works to ensure improved and streamlined operations. For more information on products and services offered by Format Solutions, please visit formatsolutions.com. Our speaker today is Ian Mealy. Ian is the Product Marketing Director for Formulation at Format Solutions and boasts over 30 years of experience with formulation software. His career began earning a degree in agriculture and joining a large UK cooperatives graduate program, where he acquired extensive experience in feed business operations. With more than 25 years at Format Solutions, Ian has collaborated with a global clientele across diverse sectors such as feed, pet food, aqua, premix, and food and beverage. He is passionate about helping customers optimize business processes, improve ingredient purchasing strategies, and enhance product quality. Please join me in welcoming Ian as our speaker.
Thank you very much, Debbie. It's a pleasure to be here today and to speak with everybody. I'm looking forward to the interaction on the poll questions and any more questions later on as well. We're going to be looking at sustainability within the pet food formulation, and to see why formulation is so important in this topic. The aim today really is to show how we can use formulation software both to evaluate and implement strategies so we can understand and improve the sustainability of our products. We're going to look at the significance of the recipe or formula within this question of sustainability, and then we'll discuss how formulation and the optimization techniques, which are at its heart, can help us achieve our sustainability goals, both for the formula and perhaps beyond that as well. So first of all, let's just set some context with a bit of background. Now, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, it's estimated, or at least in 2020, it was estimated that food production in its widest sense was responsible for over 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which is clearly, it's significant. In relation to pet food, if we consider that as a segment within it, there's varying studies of the relative impact of pet food. One study published by the University of Edinburgh in the UK, where I'm based, estimated that dry pet food production in the US was responsible for around 25% of that proportion of global greenhouse gas emissions. However, by contrast, another study by the trade body UK Pet Food put the proportion for the UK pet food industry at around 1.5%. So quite a disparity illustrates one of the challenges that we face within the pet food industry in relation to understanding our sustainable current sustainability benchmark. I think maybe the difference perhaps here is related to how byproducts, and in particular animal byproducts, are accounted between those two different studies. Another thing to say here is, of course, that sustainability is not just about greenhouse gas emissions. That UK pet food study looked at a wide range of aspects and factors, including land use, deforestation, water pollution, and water consumption. Now, for the latter, that water usage, that UK pet food study estimated that in UK production, that was responsible for 6% of the water used within the food production sector as a whole, whereas and in terms of deforestation, the soybean used in pet food could be identified as coming from high-risk sources, as in a high risk of causing deforestation. 34% of the volume of soy used within the pet food production. So there's definitely work being done on understanding the impact of pet food production in relation to sustainability. Meanwhile, some of the prevailing trends within pet food, as we know, and I'm just picking out a couple of highlights here, includes the continuing growth of the sector, as well as premiumization and humanization. And one could say that perhaps these trends may run counter to efforts to reduce an environmental footprint. For example, reducing usage of byproducts, perhaps. Now, another aspect to consider here is that within the production of a pet food recipe, as with any animal feed that I get to be involved with, the actual cost of the recipe is highly influenced, obviously, by the recipes we actually use. So we could estimate, depending on the product type and its and how it's perhaps delivered, how it's packaged, the cost of the ingredients in the feed could be responsible for anywhere between 50 and 70%, maybe even higher, of the total cost paid for the product. And so clearly the recipe itself has a significant impact in terms of cost, but we could also see in other studies that the environmental impact of the products has a similar proportion related to the ingredients themselves. So clearly the recipe has a significant impact and needs consideration. Now, whilst it varies by region, there is an increasing pressure through the supply chain for transparency and meaningful progress in reducing environmental impacts, with greenhouse gases perhaps getting the most attention. Now, it originates from governments and consumers, but it translates and transmits through to retailers and brands. And the pressure is being seen both in the companion animal pet food sector and the agricultural sector in equal measure, perhaps agricultural sector feeling it sooner. Now, for example, a recent article in Pet Food Industry, and we're being hosted by Pet Food Industry today. One of the recent articles was the results of a survey showing the majority of Gen Z pet owners rather, considered eco-friendly options first, and that they research their choices. So this is showing that really the consumers are going to expect real action, not just words. And of course, this is against the background of rapidly expanding population. That in itself is going to drive the need for agricultural production to increase by an estimated 50% by 2050. The knock-on effect of that is competition for ingredients and potentially increased scrutiny on which ingredients we use in feeding pets rather than humans, of course. So the pet food industry is clearly going to be expected to play its part in endeavours to reduce environmental impacts. Now, this is likely to come with a cost, of course. So as an industry, we're going to have to innovate to ensure a robust, sustainable food supply. Mitigation strategies will have to be investigated, and they'll include things like increasing efficiency, and of particular interest to us today, perhaps looking at ingredient usage. Nevertheless, I think costs will have to be passed on, and this will continue to play into market position of products. It's also true to say that work done on improving the information surrounding the analysis for pet food is required. For example, I think we alluded to it just before, the debate on how to measure the impact of ingredients used in the industry, given that there's a wide range of byproducts used and they would have otherwise gone to waste. Now, in this webinar, we're going to look at some aspects of how technology can help you, the producer, the nutritionist, play our part in addressing these challenges. So with that in mind, with that background in mind, I'd like to pose a couple of poll questions. So I'm going to hand over for those. And here's the first question, very simple, yes, no, particularly. Does your company have sustainability goals? Very simple, yes, no, or you may not be aware. So please just select your answer. I'll give you a moment to check that before we move on to the next question. Okay, and I think we've got all the answers in. And to the next question, so perhaps if you don't have goals, then choose the not applicable answer here. But for the goals, for those who do have sustainability goals, what are they focused on? Is it on carbon emissions, or perhaps greenhouse gases as a generalized item there? Or are you looking it more widely across other factors such as deforestation, land and water use? Or are you not aware of any particular focus? Please choose the appropriate option. Okay, thanks for the responses. Let's have a quick look at the results there. So that's really interesting to see And from my conversations with customers, I'm not particularly surprised that the overwhelming majority of your company do have sustainability goals. And given that fact, where are we focusing? Let's see the results for the second question rather. Okay, and that's interesting to see that multiple factors are sort of across the sustainability piece is being considered. So again, a clear majority looking widely at the item, with some obviously not being aware. But okay, so that's really helpful. Thank you. Part of the reason I asked that was that for us as a software provider, it's really interesting, really helpful to see customer feedback, and in areas that are of concern for our customers. And with that in mind, we did a more complex, more thorough, if you like, survey of customers in last year. A variety of customers in different markets across the globe, in fact, to understand their current thinking on sustainability. And we found that sustainability is high on most people's agenda, as we've just seen. And in fact, that of those questioned, the average rating in terms of priority initiative was 4 out of 5, if they were to put it on a scale. A number stated they had specific carbon reduction targets and even carbon neutrality objectives for the future. And nevertheless, there was a recognition that getting good data was a challenge in doing this. And part of the work that they were doing right now was to improve the accuracy of that data so that they could be more certain on their current status and where they were heading. Reporting was absolutely necessary, and in particular trend analysis and full supply chain analysis was very important to people. That aspect of there being a cost was acknowledged by customers we spoke to, and several suggested that understanding this and finding ways to mitigate would be important. And the strategies that were mentioned by customers included, or actually centered on, ingredient purchasing and how formulation could help monitor, report, but also go deeper in helping design products and select ingredients with the aim of reducing sustainability measures or improving sustainability. Now, interestingly, many we spoke to saw opportunity here in helping the customers achieve their goals and understand where they sat, but also gaining business through the company's sustainability strategy. And there were other aspects as well as just sustainability parameters and overall efficiency, and this point about not just looking at carbon, but looking more widely at other factors, as we've just seen from the results of the poll that we just took. So with that background, let's turn our attention specifically to formulation and how this technology is going to help us. I think it's worth a quick step backwards to say, what does formulation actually do? And that'll help us perhaps see where it can play its part to an extent. Firstly, it's a well-established technology used to a greater or lesser extent, depending on the company and their approach, etc. But its aim is to create cost-effective formulas that meet required nutritional targets. And it can actually also incorporate other aspects such as production considerations, ingredient availability. So that is more of a holistic view, a way of formulating to create a recipe beyond just the nutrition. Now, formulation systems also include features which help us to manage variability. Those ingredients we use are innately variable, and that's a challenge that you as a manufacturer, as a nutritionist, face every day. And so formulation helps us to deal with that and respond to it if necessary, and produces formulas that takes all this into consideration. But as well as the formula, it outputs ingredients, ingredient requirements, and helps us to manage the allocation of valuable ingredients. And it ensures, or helps us ensure, that we have the best ingredient selection for our production sites and the products that we're going to manufacture. In essence, the main motivation for using formulation is the efficient use of resources to support good animal performance. So you could actually say that formulation and sustainability are really, really well aligned already. However, in the past, cost reduction and nutritional quality were the main objectives. Now, additional considerations of the environmental impact will need to be incorporated into how we produce our formulas or how we design our formulas. So the fact that formulation decides the product recipe and therefore which ingredients we use means it has an enormous influence on the sustainability of the production, of our production. As we saw right at the beginning, the influence that recipe has on the overall cost profile of our products, and obviously the nutrition and performance, it's absolutely key. So the decisions we make in formulation have a huge impact. So take a little bit of a deeper look here. Here's a simplified view of the supply chain with a pet food company highlighted by the dotted line, if you like, taking in ingredients, processing them according to the formula decided by the formulation function and software, packaging them, and then distributing them. This is a supply chain in which each of those activities can be looked at in terms of the footprint for that activity. And obviously, we can pursue strategies for improving the footprint or reducing the footprint of those individual activities. So all of them, as well as formulation, can actually also inform strategies for offsetting or insetting, and those strategies can inform what we need to do internally in those processes, of course. There's a clear feedback loop too between the formulation, the ingredients used, and the animals fed, and both can influence the recipe, and the recipe can influence those as well. So there's a whole interaction, and I think one of the things I'd like to help us think about is a holistic view that there are interactions across this supply chain, and that perhaps we should think like that. But of course, today we're thinking of formulation, and the approach is taken through that. How's formulation going to help us? So how do we approach this? How do we address sustainability in pet food? I think it's very simple. The first step is to understand our current situation. If you like, get a benchmark of where we are. And on that score, to gauge where we are as an audience here today, perhaps I will move to the next poll question. Again, simple yes, no answer here. As a company, have you done any measurements on the environmental impact of your products? And you may have taken a broad view of the whole supply chain like I was just looking at, or just the formula, or just part of that supply chain. So in any shape or form, if you could just say yes or no, or if you don't know. Okay, thank you very much. And then let's move on to the follow-on question to that. So in that activity of doing a benchmark on your current production, what did you find was the biggest challenge? Was it the ingredient data, getting the information on the formula? Was it the calculation that you were applying to, getting the correct calculation or the appropriate calculation? Was it actually reporting that number, or were there more internal issues of organizing all the information from the different departments? Okay, hopefully, let's have a quick look at the results. Okay, so an even split between yes and no about carrying out an environmental impact assessment. That's interesting to see, and maybe given the number of companies that have environmental or sustainability goals, maybe this will shift in the forthcoming period of time. And given that profile, for those who did assess, what was the challenge? Ingredient data high there, and then followed by a calculation to apply. Okay, so that's really helpful information. Thank you very much. And I sort of not surprised by those answers either. Okay, so continuing this theme of understanding your current situation, the formulation system can really help. And assuming we are able to get some data for our ingredients, formulation system, such as the reports shown here from Format's ARA system, it is able to report on the product and give insights into the sustainability footprint. So this particular report is breaking down, in this case, the carbon footprint for a product and showing us which ingredients are contributing proportionally to the total carbon footprint for this product. And so this type of report for one product or across products is able to give us insights into where we currently stand, which ingredients are contributing, and raise questions about what we might do to improve from this point. I mean, questions that come to my mind straight away are, well, given that this ingredient contributes to the carbon footprint, what drives the requirement for that ingredient? Or are there alternatives to that ingredient which would maintain quality but help reduce the footprint? That sort of question, by having the knowledge, we can start asking pertinent questions. Now, formulation systems, as well as reporting what we have on the formulas today, they also record the history of formulas over time. And so this is really useful as we follow the reporting needs of trend analysis. Really helpful for us to know where we are today, but also how we're progressing in the future, and perhaps how we've been in the past. Another recent development in terms of the reporting where we stand today is the integration, this is a recent development really, but the integration of formulation systems with LCA tools or life cycle analysis tools. And these can give a readout on the environmental impacts for a feed product, or indeed for the whole life cycle of the production of that product. Now, it's true to say that this is a work in progress for pet food. More work has been done in the agricultural sector for animal production, livestock production, but I think that pet food will be catching up in this area. And I know of at least one LCA tool which is highly focused on providing a pet food solution. Now, one of the challenges we've just seen in the poll question is getting data on the ingredients. And so the benefits, or amongst the benefits of using LCA tools, is the fact that you can actually, if you like, delegate the collation of information to a purpose-built tool that is designed to do that. And not only can they provide data for you, but it's accredited to ISO standards. It also helps remove the tunnel vision on carbon by giving a full impact analysis across the numerous categories which are expected to be reported on. So greenhouse gases, but also land use, deforestation, etc. And so this takes a lot of the maintenance headache of doing this benchmark away from you, the nutritionist. And I think it's illustrative of the collaboration across the industry in this field that continues. So with an understanding of current footprints, the next question is, how do we actually improve? What do we do about it? Now, as mentioned earlier, each facet of the production process can be treated on its own. Packaging is a good example. You know, there's work you can do with packaging to source more sustainable alternatives from one compared to the other option. But again, within the formula itself, and that has a heavy influence on this question, the common approach I come across, first of all, is to work with your ingredient suppliers. We mentioned about the quality of data on ingredients, and I think ingredient suppliers or trade bodies that represent a particular ingredient type are a good place to go to work with to improve the information on sustainability about those ingredients and to bring that information back. And if they don't have that information, that then they knowing that you need it opens a conversation to obviously improve that supply of information. Logically, it's not just about knowing more about the ingredients you're using, but it might be to, for example, improve the carbon footprint of or other impacts of the ingredients you're using today. So that might affect sourcing or processing and such like. We're seeing this in Europe, where we're moving towards legislation on the use of soya from sources which are accredited to be of low impact on deforestation. Now, we might then go further and essentially to reformulate. And this will, in this sense, we're now moving to the realm of evaluating or using alternative ingredients, either in addition or in replacement for ingredients or ingredient sources we have today, or perhaps also looking at how we structure our formulas with a mind to their sustainability. But of course, this has to all be done with care, because the first priority is that those products maintain performance. Now, Formulation, or formulation software rather, has at its heart an optimization tool, which is we use to balance all the requirements and propose a recipe, the most cost-effective recipe to meet the performance requirements nutritionally. So it's logical to leverage those optimization techniques, that capability, to help us assess ways to improve in the area of sustainability as well, and to help us decide on the best course of action. So the same data that we use for reporting that we saw earlier, just giving us information on current recipes, we can actually use that within an optimization when we are creating a recipe or proposing a recipe. And so this chart here, where this blue star is showing, this is a readout of a particular optimization, a particular product, and it is showing on the x-axis the carbon footprint that is the result of just normally formulating this product. And that we have here the carbon footprint shown in relation to the cost of that product. This is just a simple readout for the product. If you like, a report of the carbon footprints for this product. Now, if, as many of us do, have goals to reduce the footprint, for example, in carbon emissions, then we're going to want to move that carbon footprint for any particular formula, if you like, from the right to the left to a smaller value. That makes sense to help, or it makes sense as an option to help us meet our sustainability goals as a company. So I've investigated what happens as we do that. So I run a series of optimizations in which I have reduced the carbon footprint or restricted the carbon footprint for this product and see what happens, just using standard optimization techniques. And this chart now I've overlaid from our starting point as we force the carbon footprint to be lower and lower. Inevitably, the cost goes up, and we mentioned the cost impact earlier. This is for those of you who optimize or use formulation software. This is not unexpected. It's a normal optimization behavior. It's doing this because as we say, we are not allowing the carbon footprint to be higher than such and such a value. The optimization has to find an alternative solution, and that alternative solution costs more. So these cost impacts are a substantial hurdle, obviously, and so reducing, whilst we want to reduce the sustainability impact, reduce the carbon footprint in this case, we also want to mitigate the cost impact. So inevitably, we're going to have to look at strategies to reduce that, to help with that. And those strategies, as mentioned before, include reviewing our ingredients that we're using and perhaps modifying the specification as long as we're going to maintain performance. So how do we go about that? One of the great things about formulation software is its ability to be used to evaluate ingredients. And in this regard, we're going to be looking at either new ingredients to add to our current portfolio, or we're going to replace ingredients because obviously we have limited storage, limited capacity to use ingredients. And the aim is to improve the environmental impact whilst maintaining nutrition and minimizing the effect on cost. But we have to consider, are these ingredients suitable to be used, or can we handle them? Are we going to use enough of them? And the formulation software like ARA really helps with this because we're able to model these scenarios in what ARA at least terms time periods. So we can set up scenarios to model options without impacting day-to-day work or current recipes. So we can look at different scenarios. Now, my advice, if you like, would be to look at these questions, these evaluations using a multi-product optimizer like Multimix. This gives us a global view, not just of the ingredients we're going to use, but their total value and their total impact on the plant, and indeed the total impact on sustainability improvements. So we're able to model the scenario and compare scenarios to show us the impact on cost and to help us choose which is the best option. Going forward, there are the possibility of using newer optimization techniques such as multi-objective, to use the technical term, multi-objective optimization. Now, we are going to be using, if you like, normally we are optimizing to cost. We're trying to minimize cost, but now we need to minimize footprint as well. So in the same scenarios we looked at before, I've now used a new technique where we want to find the optimal carbon footprint within an acceptable cost overhead. And here, that same exercise before, we found that we can reduce the carbon footprint up to a certain point without impacting the cost over a certain threshold. And the beauty of this is that it actually also highlights for us any shortfall in an ideal target. So we're achieving just over 0.8 kilograms equivalent per ton. What if we really wanted to achieve 0.75? It will highlight that for us, and then we can go back to the ingredients evaluation technique we've just looked at to see how could we get there within the acceptable cost threshold. So this technique not only gives us the footprint, but it actually gives us the physical weight of carbon to be produced and highlights the shortfall in any target that we actually wanted to achieve. So again, we can go back to evaluate any ingredient purchasing decisions and indeed look at this from a total carbon footprint perspective using a multi-product optimizer. That opens up an optimization possibility of being able to allocate restrictions on, for example, global production of carbon from this plant and let the optimizer say where it would be best to allocate that restriction. There are a couple of extensions to the method which really center on being able to look beyond just carbon into multiple impact categories. Another aspect is manufacturing. And for manufacturing, this is an interesting example of where we can go beyond the formula and simply the nutrition. Now, in this regard, I mean, anecdotally, we know that certain ingredients affect how easy it is to produce manufacture a feed. Some will cause blockages, perhaps. Some will cause issues with quality. And with this question in mind, a number of years ago, Format undertook a multi-year project with a UK feed manufacturer and an NGO called the Carbon Trust to ask, well, can formulation help us understand impacts of the formula on energy consumption in the plant, and linked to that, the carbon consumption. And so we were looking at that in relation to certain industry requirements to improve efficiency on production and reduce carbon emissions. At the time, these mechanisms which were in place may have changed over time, but really the impact of or the incentive to improve efficiency is always there, of course. And so what we did was to measure many batches of feed being produced and measure the energy consumption. Regression analysis was performed on those to derive a factor for the individual ingredients and their effect on the energy. They could then be incorporated into the optimization, and we can then use that information to produce new recipes. These recipes predicted the carbon emissions and the energy consumption. And as you can see from this chart on the right, the predicted, as shown on in the x-axis, had a very good correlation to the actual consumption measured for those formulas. So I think this is a great illustration of how formulation can perhaps go beyond just the nutrition part, but to incorporate other aspects, and indeed in other aspects that relate to sustainability as well. So just to finish here, what of the future? I think that as we've seen through this presentation, thinking of the whole supply chain, the formula is part of that, but there are links to other aspects of production. Working with tools such as the life cycle analysis tools will help us, but also within formulation, we can model these interactions and report on the formula and its sustainability impact. I think we might see developments in optimization techniques. Comfortingly, there are multiple techniques already available which allow us to measure interactions which may be non-linear, and to incorporate those, but then we may uncover more interactions, especially when we start to look just beyond carbon. Formulation also incorporates information on the reasons behind costs of any diet, and perhaps some machine learning here might be useful in helping us to explore that solution surface more efficiently, more effectively than we can do manually. And just to conclude, I think that we've seen that formulas and formulation has a direct environmental impact and influences aspects of production. We can use the LCA tools and formulation itself to provide insights, and it's uniquely placed to help us assess and to put into action impact reducing measures. But a holistic view is required, I would suggest. So advice from my own standpoint and where I've talked with customers is understand your current situation, work with your suppliers to improve data and improve footprints of existing ingredients, look at reduction strategies throughout the business holistically, and form an action plan. So I'll draw that to a conclusion just now. Thank you for your attendance and attention, and I'd be very happy to hopefully answer some questions.
Thank you, Ian. That was a lot of great information. Before we get started on the Q&A, I just want to remind everyone that Ian's presentation is available as a handout. right now during this live broadcast. If you go to the handouts window in your GoToWebinar panel on the right side of your screen, you can download it from there. It will not be available from us after the broadcast, although Ian may be able to provide it. His email's right here on the screen. So Ian, just to start us off, you just had, your conclusions. Would you say that's sort of a roadmap for how to get started on
Yeah,
on all this? Because sustainability and coming up with, ways to improve your sustainability, as we saw from the poll questions, is can be pretty complicated.
yeah. I think I think my advice is based on conversations with customers and other people working in the field, and I think the important thing is to make a start.
Right,
Um, there is a lot of as we perhaps discussed through the presentation, there's some gaps in data, but that is improving. And so I think it's best not to wait for the data to be perfect. It's a work in progress. So to make a start of what are you interested in? It's clear the companies attending here have strategies or desires to work in this area,
right.
and they have goals. So I think make a start, um, and talk to suppliers, talk to people in the industry working in this field. I'm happy to talk to customers about this topic as well, and just sort of formulate a way to set up. Yeah, just make a start. So I think
Okay.
they're reasonable steps.
So honing in a little bit on the data. Um, So you're showing that example with Format Solution Software that there is some carbon footprint data. Do I understand correctly that it's woven into the software, or would that have to be supplied by someone using the software
Yeah.
from another source?
So there's two approaches really. We would facilitate the place to hold the information, and all the nutritionists on this call now will be very familiar with putting information they know about ingredients into a formulation system, and so the same would occur with sustainability data. Where you would get that information from varies, so it might be the supplier, it might be industry bodies. Um, uh, there are organisations working in this field,
Hmm.
and they can supply information which you can then add along with your nutritional data. The LCA tools is one source really.
Right,
They actually work on collating the data from databases such as the GFLI database, the Global Feed Livestock Life Cycle uh, database, which is the accredited source of data, and which is also still a work in progress, of course.
yes, right.
Um, so that many companies I work with are working on their own data, and some are more happy to work with um, a tool that's supplying that data or an organization that's supplying that data
Right.
for them.
Okay. Yeah, and speaking of the GFLI, one, just for folks on the webinar now, I know that there are efforts underway to extend that into at least rendered pet food ingredients, so mostly protein ingredients. Shameless plug here, we will be having a presentation during our Pet Food Essentials um, seminar, which it starts the day before Pet Food Forum. It's focusing on sustainability this year, and there's a gentleman who's been helping. He's working with the Renderers Association in Europe, and now with the North American Association to further develop that database specific to rendered ingredients in pet food. And there's also one from that the Pet Sustainability Coalition has implemented for members. Um, working with a company called How Good that has an extensive database. So there are sources out there. They are new, as
Yeah.
Ian, as you indicated. They're still in development, but hopefully there'll be more tools. Um, Specific to that, we have a question from the audience that you mentioned there's some partnership between companies to share footprint data. Is there is there a specific group that people can join?
Um, well, one of the examples I had in mind was actually companies or producers who have engaged, if what you might call um, consultants in this field, who
Mhm.
would then go and do assessments for you. Because one of the challenges in pet food, of course, is the poultry meal in one part of the world is not poultry meal in another part of the world or even
Right,
part of the country. And so, then I think there will be a hybrid approach. So I think the trade industry, so you mentioned the renderers, European Renderers Association, that it's that sort of level, working with consultants or even individual suppliers. Um, and I've even come across companies who have done their own life cycle assessments on um, materials because there's no other source of information. So it's a
right,
bit of a patchwork at the moment.
right,
Um, I think my reflection also was that there will need to be more collaboration. Some of the collaboration perhaps isn't quite there yet.
right,
Um, but I think we're seeing it develop as your examples, Debbie,
right.
illustrated. Yeah,
Yeah. So for the person asking the question, I think the answer is, right now look to your suppliers and to trade groups
yeah.
because they might be the ones that are doing the most work on that now. For a specific kind of ingredient, someone asked, so so if you're looking at your formulation and its sustainability impact and its cost, obviously, as you stressed several times, is very, very important, of course. Does palatability enter into that at all?
So I would put palatability. That's a great question. I've alluded a couple of times to the fact that formulation goes beyond nutrition,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that I gave the illustration of manufacturing and the impact on energy usage. Palatability and physical quality, they're also parameters which go beyond the nutrition, but which people that I work with, and indeed myself when I was formulating, you try and reflect in some way within the formula. And I think so. My answer is yes. My simple answer is yes. I just want to emphasize that there are different approaches to it, and I think it's a great thing for that type of consideration to be brought into the formula, because when you do, you get a better chance of the formula being more accurate and more acceptable, more producible, more acceptable to the animal as well. And then your plans are more easily adhered to. You don't have to change things in an unforeseen way. Um, how to do that? There are many approaches, in relation to palatability, quality, etc. All these other parameters.
Okay. There's a question related to time-bound solutions, and I'm not sure I quite understand it. Different products and several formulas. Are there any time-bound solutions offered to meet the goals? So maybe the
Time
person, yeah,
bound.
maybe the person is asking, you're looking at different parameters like cost and carbon impact.
Mhm.
Is there a time element? That's how I'm interpreting it, the question at least.
Right. Um, I mean, the person who asked the question is more than welcome to email me
Okay,
to explain a little more. But I mean, time is always an element, because what is true today is not true tomorrow, and it wasn't true yesterday. So
sure.
I mentioned the feature of time periods, and that is one way that a formulation system can help you be specific about um, the situation today, and also model a potential situation in the future, which is typically for planning. And so,
Right.
and coupled with that is the case where you might want a formula working now, but it's only you only want it to be valid for a period of time as well. And so that is part of how you implement a formula and control it in sort of from a system perspective. Um, so I would say yes, time considerations can be brought into the situation, whether that's cost, nutrition, um, product requirements, etc.
Okay, and to that point, that there's also a link obviously with, you know, the supply chain and, supply and demand of ingredients, of course, greatly
Yeah,
affects the cost.
absolutely.
So let's wrap up then with this final question, which has to do with, the current, not to get into geopolitics at all, but there's the person had commented that he's seen articles tracking larger food and beverage companies that are seeking to reduce capital expenditures. So what do you think do you have any thoughts on the impact on sustainable operations and supply chain management and how that plays into, um, you know, people trying to increase the sustainability of their products?
Yeah, I think I'm not a macroeconomist, economist for
None of us
sure.
are.
No, or or anything like. But I think one of the messages in my presentation is around the fact that we have to be adaptable to essentially what the market wants
Right.
and what the restrictions imposed on us. Because there's things you just mentioned, ingredient supply. Those things we can't always control, but we have to live with them and deal with them. And so part of the message that I have is that using formulation can help us adapt to situations, but also plan ahead. A
Hmm.
good use of the system. Whatever my opinion of what the future holds, and I know that I will get that wrong. Um, I can utilize the software to look at the different scenarios and try and anticipate. I mean, I could give a personal view on this particular field and how
Right.
we and how worthy an ambition it is. For me, there is an aspect of it makes sense as well. It's about efficiency, and I said right at the beginning of the presentation that animal feed we've always used byproducts. We are about sustainability right from the beginning,
Right.
and I think good use of formulation software enhances that.
Agreed. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, thank you very much, Ian. And I'd like to thank all of
Pleasure.
our attendees today for taking the time to listen in. A recording will be made available to view as an on-demand video starting tomorrow. To register for our upcoming webinars, view that on-demand video, or see other on-demand webinars on related topics, please visit petfoodindustry.com/webinars. Please remember to take a couple minutes to answer our short survey after the webinar. And thank you again to our sponsor, Format Solutions, for their participation and support today. For more information on their products and services, please visit formatsolutions.com. And again, a big thank you to Ian for his sharing his expertise and insights. Thanks again for joining us and have a great day.
You, bye.